Hello, and welcome to BCS 101. This is Lazarus, the creator of the BCS. Um, Today we're just going to try and go over some of the basics of the BCS, uh, how it works, where the value numbers come from, just the basics, and how I started with the fighter to try and learn how to decode the system. Um, so let's begin at the beginning. What is the BCS? Uh, You'll get the best information by going to the subreddit for the BCS, r/OGL_BCS. And there you'll find this pin post at the top, which gives you, the release notes and the basics of it. But basically, the BCS is an attempt to reverse engineer the class system for second edition, and evaluate all the classes using the same metric uh, of a total numerical value. So, um, do you want or need the BCS? Well, if you're just playing the game, you don't need the BCS to understand how to play the game, obviously. Um, the BCS is for people mostly who are looking to make custom classes, whether you're looking to sell it on, on a drive-through or something, or if you just want to make a custom class for your own homebrew campaign. The BCS is free. This is the BCS. It is free, and it gives you all of the information that you need to do that, but it doesn't really make it simple for you to make your custom classes. That you would have to do a lot of work on your own. So, for that reason, I created the BCS Class Creator Form. This is a paid product. It's currently $8, although it's going to be on sale soon. And there may be sales throughout the year, so keep an eye out. Um, so the class creator form just makes it pretty point and click for you to be able to make custom classes. And here's what it looks like. It does work within Chrome. It's best used with Acrobat, but it does work pretty well with Chrome. I can't really recommend any other apps because I don't know how simple this looks to you, but it's extremely advanced. There's about 7,000 lines of code behind here. But you can see that you can just point and click and select things, and it will update numbers for your totals. And of course, you want as we'll learn later, you want your total to add up to 2,100. So this is available, and then it also comes with a complete guide, step by step, that'll show you how to use this form step by step by step to make a whole. The demo version essentially from the guide shows you how to turn the Eldritch Archer archetype into a full class. So I highly recommend it. It'll help you understand the system better, and this is going to be a lot easier for you to use if you actually want to make a custom class or just test your own classes that you've already made. All right. So, how do we get started? Well, this all started, obviously, I wanted to make a custom class. And, everybody at the time said, well, you just look at the existing classes and kind of like try to copy it and change a few things. And that wasn't really good enough for me. But then I had a thought as I started looking at classes to do that, to look at them and try and copy and paste them essentially. But I had an idea while I was looking at them. I was actually playing a sorcerer in my campaign that I was in at the time, and I noticed when I was building my character up to level 20, in Path Builder like you do, that it has the level 19 feature that gives you a single 10th level spell slot, and then it has the level 20 feat that gives you an additional level 10 spell slot. And I looked at these, and this is basically the same thing. Level 10 spell slot, level 10 spell slot. Um, and I started to think, are these equal to each other? Is a level 20 feat equal to a level 19 class feature? Or at least in some way connected to it. Uh, and so this is where the start of my thought process began back in about probably October 2021. So that's where I started. So I decided I wanted to really know how to make a class. Well, first place I started was here, which you can still see in the BCS, Original Classes Compared tab. Now the community already had several, or at least a couple of spreadsheets out there where people had, plotted out the proficiencies, saves, and weapons and stuff for all the classes. And I looked at those, but they weren't enough because I wanted to evaluate the whole class, not just the proficiencies. So I made this chart here where I put all the proficiencies in, but also added all of the class features. Every little thing that they get, skills, HP, all the little extra, shield blocks and, the special things that they get, surprise attack. I did all this so that I could see it on one spot and try and analyze it and evaluate it. In my day-to-day job, I'm basically a data analyst and database manager. So I spent some good time analyzing this. I made a few separate things. The original save analysis, where I just took the saves out and analyzed them on their own to see, how to group, how different classes can be grouped together by the similar saves that they get and when they get them, and just use this for some more analysis. I learned some things. One of the, a few of the things that I learned you see here, like no saves get master before 7, and no saves get legendary before 13. These were all just data points that just help me get in mind how the classes work. So then once I had all that, I said, okay, I've got an idea of how things come together. And I thought, how do I value them? And so that's when I started thinking about, okay, I just had this idea, and I can't even remember exactly how I got the idea. But I got the idea, what if I just add up the levels 1 to 20? So I add up 1, 2, 3, all the way to 20. Well, if you add all these up, you get 210. And it's like, well, that doesn't really tell you much. I mean, 210, what does that tell you? Nothing. But I did have the idea that if this right here gave me the idea that classes, if a level 20 feat is similar to or equal to a level 19 feature, then classes in their features might just be made up of feats. And basically, classes might just be made up of a bunch of feats put together. And so that's when I started thinking about this, and one of the ideas I had was that in looking at a lot of the I was also analyzing different feats, ancestry feats, class feats, archetype feats, and I kind of had the idea that skills might be worth half of a level 1 feat, because there's a lot of level 1 feats that give you like 2 skills and a little bonus or something, and so I had the idea that skills might be worth half a level. Well, if that was the case, I didn't want decimals in here. I didn't want 0.5 per skill. So I multiplied by 10 to give me 2100, so that I could have nice round numbers. If skills were in here, and I thought they were, then they'd be worth 5 points. I wouldn't have to deal with decimals. Well, at this point, I've got 2100 as a total, which is a weird number, right? And I thought, well, maybe it's not 2100. Maybe it's actually 2000. maybe 2000 is just a good starting point. And so that was my starting point, was looking at 2000. And if this is a current version here, we're going to be looking at the fighter class. As I said, it's one of the simplest classes, and it's where I started, because I thought if I can figure out the fighter, then that's a good place to start, and maybe I can figure out other classes from there. So we're going to be looking at just the fighter on the class data and the values for that. But I just want to take a quick peek back. This folder is where the BCS is. It's publicly accessible. And within that is this folder, which is prior versions. So it's where the archive versions are going to be, and it's where the earliest versions is. So you can actually go back and see a little bit of the history of how I came about it. There's also this BCS and Not Brief History that is several pages long, but it gives you more of a in-depth history of how I developed the system and some of the things I did incorrectly along the way until I finally found things that started working. But if you go and look at, let's see, I believe version 0.2. Yeah, you can see point value is 2000. This is when I was trying to get it to add up to 2000. Because I had this 2100 number, but I just, for whatever reason, I thought that couldn't be it. It must be 2000 maybe, or at least that's a place I was going to start. Now, there was no guarantee that there even was this system like I thought there was. It's possible I was entirely wrong, and that there was no class point value system where they all added up to the same amount. And if that had been the case, if I had found that along the way, then I would have just said, okay, it's not a real thing. I'll just work on design guidelines. But once the numbers started coming together, I thought, oh wait, there might actually be a point value system here. And you can see in the class totals here, when I was trying to get to 2000, we just glance at the fighter here. You can see I actually got it to balance to 2000. And there's various ways I went about that. And if you want to go back and look at that, you can see like where it kind of started compared to where it is now, which is what we're going to look at. We're going to look at where it is now. So let's look at the fighter. This is all the fighter's class features here. Just pull them out for easy viewing here. Let's start at the top. Key ability, strength or dexterity. I don't think there's any value, numerical value to these, because every class gets a key ability. Some get a choice, but they all just pick one. So at the end, they all have the same thing. So even if this was like, I can't imagine strength and intelligence are worth different amounts. If they all were worth an amount, it'd be the same, and so it wouldn't matter. If they were all worth 10 points, well then it doesn't matter if there's no differences. It only matters for a value system like this if there's differences. So if you see here, obviously the next thing is hit points. Well, funny story, for the first 100 hours of me working on the BCS, I didn't have hit points charted at all. I totally skipped this part and didn't think of it until much later on, which would cause a lot of problems. I was having trouble making the numbers work, and I was like, I wasn't sure if these numbers were working because I had gotten the fighter to add up to 2,000 points. But then I tried other classes and I couldn't get any of them to add up to 2,000 points. Well, look at this. If HP is 100 points, well, if I take that out, then the fighter adds up to 2,000 points. Well, so it looked like it was balanced, but when I tried to get other classes to 2,000 points, they couldn't balance. They were always, 40, 60 off or whatever. Well, once I figured out, oh, I need to actually count the HP within the values, and the total needs to be 2,100, then I call this my breakthrough moment. It was actually the day before Thanksgiving in 2021. I remember, and basically, as soon as I figured out those two things, that I needed to include HP and that the classes need to add up to 2100, suddenly all the classes started adding up like perfectly across the board. Just about. I mean, obviously there's still tweaks to do and there's still questions here and there, but suddenly they mostly added up, and I was like, oh wait, this system might actually work. I think it actually is working this way. So uh, I've got these at the top just because it's a good place to have these. But of course, it's a little further down in the actual class there. But there's you get your fighter. Your fighter gets level 1 feat, and you know if we're thinking feats are equal to 10 points per level, then a level 1 feat is 10 points. And shield block is a level 1 general feat. And so I give it 10 points, and it seems to be working across different classes. But obviously, general feats vary in their, power level, essentially. You look at Canny Acumen, which is also a level 1 general feat. Well, that thing gives you expert and master in a save. Obviously, that's pretty powerful, but it's a level 1 general feat. So general feats just seem to be a little all over in power, but because the general feats have limited number of slots, it seems that's where the developers are balancing them by simply giving them a very limited number of slots. So moving on, we'll look at the DCs here. This is a class DC, or if this was a caster, they would have a spell DC instead. Just to help you understand how to read this, these are all of the points, obviously, and these are the class features. And for things like this, for the proficiencies especially, I have trained, and then this is the level where the class gets it. So level 1, it gets trained DC. Level 11, it gets expert DC. Level 19 is when it finally gets master DC. So perception, we'll start with the expert in perception. So what I have here is trained is level 0 because you still need to have a cost associated with it. Trained is 10 points, and the way I came about that is mostly because every class gets at least trained in all their proficiencies at level 1. Some get expert, but they all get at least trained at level 1. And so I just give trained a level 1 cost of 10 points, and that seems to be working across the board. I don't think that's ever been a question for me. It seems to be the right number. Then expert at level 1 for 50 points. And then, so there's your saves. You just whenever I get a new class, then I'll just go through and I'll plug these in. And because we can see on the proficiency values, it's just one set of numbers, no matter if you're looking at attacks, defense, saves, or DC or class DCs or spell DCs. It's the same: train for 10, expert for 50, master for 110, legendary for 190. I tried in the early days I thought maybe they might be worth different, like maybe, legendary attacks were worth 190, but maybe legendary saves were only worth 150. And I had them at different costs, and that never really worked until I came up with the final totals, and then I applied it across all of the proficiencies, and it just works. So all the proficiencies have the same values, no matter for trained, expert, master, legendary. Let's see the way that we come about those numbers. This is actually the not brief history I mentioned over there that you can go and look at in the folder if you want. We're we're just going to go straight down here to this part. This is where I was evaluating proficiencies, or trying to find the values of proficiencies. I did that by basically going through all of the feats. That means, ancestry feats or class feats or archetype feats that give some kind of proficiency, and then making a list of it. This isn't like all of them, but it's a good chunk of them that just helped me to start evaluating the numbers. So here you have weapon proficiencies, feats, weapon proficiency feats, and then you have armor proficiency feats. And then right here you have save proficiency feats. And this was really the key, because the weapon proficiency feats are a little bit all over the place. Some dedications give you, simple and martial, and even, scaling expert weapons. And then, some have much higher, numbers, weapon expert at 12. So it's kind of all over the place there. Same thing with armor. We get level 14, level 14, level 12, level 12. But the save proficiencies were very consistent, at least from this grouping that I found, that helped me to get started on it. You see, these are all multi-class, and they all have a level 12 feat that give master proficiency in either perception or save. And that told me, okay, so master proficiency is a level 12 feat. Well, when we apply that to a class feature, that means level 11, which would be 110 points. Now, obviously, not all classes get their masters at level 11 at the same level, but that's not. Level isn't necessarily always tied to value. Sometimes you might have, a level 13 class feature, but it still only costs 110 points because that class feature is master proficiency, and master proficiency is 110 points no matter if you get it at level 11 or at level 7 or at level 19. And then also to note, the Alchemist multiclass gave me this. It also has Master Alchemy as a level 12 feat, which is similar to getting a class DC at Master at level 12. So it seemed kind of, if class DC and save proficiencies all have similar values, well then it also gives you Expert at level 6. And so that made me think, okay, so maybe Master is 110 points. Well, then maybe Expert is 50 points. And you see, I tried to chart out the weapons and armor, and they're a little all over the place, and I was guessing a lot. But the saves, this is pretty close to final numbers, right? 10, Expert 60, Master 120, Legendary 180, or 200 maybe. This is when I was still thinking, oh, even if it's level 5, if you put it in the class, it'll cost 60 points because it's a level 6 feat. Well, now I know this is actually 50 points. This is 120 points, and now we know that Legendary is 190 points. That took a lot of iterations to figure out. Trying different numbers until finally classes started adding up, and it's not just getting the numbers to fit what I want them to fit. It's not like I said, okay, 2000 or 2100, and I'm going to make all the numbers fit that. It's that initially the numbers didn't fit that, and I was like, okay, I think I might have it wrong. Maybe it's not. Maybe there's not even a system. Until I dug through deep enough, until finally across classes, multiple classes started adding up to 2100, and so it's like, okay, if multiple classes are adding up to the same amount, then maybe the system actually works. Alright, so going back to the fighter. Alright, so we talked about save proficiencies and the values that we got at. Let's go to skills next. So skills, the fighter, gets 3 plus int, and normally I would put 3 here. And if classes get acrobatics, then I would usually put acrobatics here. Or if a class gets training here for, you know, diplomacy, then I would just put diplomacy. But because it gets a choice, I couldn't put both acrobatics and athletics. So instead I just plugged the number up here. So it's 3 plus int, but really this is 3 plus 1 plus int. So it's 4 total for the cost purposes, and again, I had come up with the idea that maybe skills were worth about 5 points, and that seems to be working out for me, or for the system. I don't have any doubts at this point that skills increases and feats are worth 5 points each. A lot of people want to think, oh, but what if it's an what if you get it at later levels, or if it requires expert or something like that, or you get a skill increase to legendary. Isn't that worth more? And it's like, well, no, there's 2 types of balancing. There's value numbers, but then there's also level locking. And what that means is, yeah, your skill increase to legendary may only cost 5 points, but it's level locked to level 15. You can't get it before level 15. So even though it only costs 5 points, it's still level locked to level 15. And that's where the balancing of it comes in. And it is balanced. As long as you balance it the same across all classes, it does end up balanced. Alright, let's move on to attack proficiencies, which, when it comes to the fighter, turns out actually the fighter has the most complicated attack proficiency. And that's because it has the, where is it? The fighter weapon mastery, where it gets to pick a group, and the fighter gets higher proficiency in that group than all the other attacks. Well, this was difficult, to be honest. I eventually figured it out, and the best way to do it is looking at it horizontally. By the way, this sheet, the class data, I went through about 5 different complete rewrites of this, because I tried it horizontally, I tried it vertically, I tried different columns and different ways of displaying this before I got to what it is now, which is the best way for me to read. I hope other people can read it, but it's also the best way, I think, for making a database, which the BCS is essentially a database in a spreadsheet. All the numbers on here automatically get updated over to the class totals page, and they get plugged in all these places. So, but looking at the class totals here, we're looking at the fighter still. You'll see the fighter's attack proficiencies. Well, this was complicated. First of all, the fighter gets expert at level 1 in unarmed, simple, and martial, and trained and advanced. It's the only class that gets expert in level 1 in any attacks. So it made it kind of, well, later the gunslinger did, just for firearms. But this made it difficult to figure out. You'll see here, understanding this page, everything in here is level 0. That's mostly, I do this for accounting purposes so that I can see all of the accounting numbers, because this is level 1, and you see if a class gets expert at level 1, it's 50 points, but you still have to pay for training. So you can't just get training for free, you still have to pay the 10 points for training in that save or proficiency. So here we have, it took me a while to figure this out, but one of the things about attack proficiencies and defense proficiencies is you only pay once for expert, once for master, and once for legendary if it gets it. You don't pay, say, 50 points for expert martial weapons and 50 points for simple weapons and 50 points for expert and unarmed. You only pay once for expert, and that applies to anything you're proficient in. And so when it gets here to level 5, where the fighter gets his weapon mastery group, you see there's no charge here. There's no amount. Well, that's because it's already paid expert in anything. So it gets expert in one advanced group, but it doesn't matter because it's already paid for it. You see here it also, going back to level 0, essentially, you have to pay trained for each of the different groups of attack. So you have to pay 10 for unarmed, 10 for simple, and 10 for martial. And then it also pays 10 for trained and advanced. All right. So then we have the expert, which you only pay once for expert, so there's only one. And then you have master. It's like it doesn't matter when or how it gets master in anything. It only pays once for it. Once you understand the system, it makes sense how they did this. It may look a little bit like, oh, contrary, or that I'm leaving stuff out, but it makes sense the way they've done this. And then finally, legendary, you only pay once for it. This is a good place to stop and look at weapon critical specialization, weapon specialization, and greater weapon specialization. Critical specialization was not too difficult to figure out. It's 50 points. That comes from, we'll go back up here, this group of stuff here. There's several ancestry feats, level 5 feats that give weapon crit. There's this Viking feat, level 6, weapon improviser, level 6 feat that gives weapon critical specialization. And there's a few others. And so I saw this and I saw this is a pretty good standard pattern here. And so I was like, I believe it's 50 points. And so I plugged that in and it seems to be working really well. I don't have any doubts on this value. This is weapon specialization, 70 points. That one's more of a guess because I don't think there's any feats that give you weapon specialization or greater weapon specialization. Maybe there is, I can't remember. This one is more based on level. Marshals get it at level 7, and so I gave it 70 points. That was a bit of a guess, but it seems to be working out. So sometimes some of these numbers, they are guesses, but then if they work, I leave them. But if they don't work, then I'll take them out and I'll try another different number. I don't just always go with the first guess. In fact, usually anything that you see on the BCS now is probably the 10th guess or maybe even the 50th guess that I had. It was a lot of trial and error, but once the numbers started coming together, they make sense. And you can kind of see the design behind it. You can see a bit of the idea behind some of it. So I noticed that marshals are all getting it at level 7. I gave it 70 points. Even though casters get it later, it's still 70 points. But it still seems to be working for their totals. And then a similar thing with greater weapon specialization. The marshals mostly get it at level 15. Now the thing to note here is I figured this out as I was evaluating these. Weapon specialization always comes at the odd level after a class gets expert in attacks. Of course, the fighter is weird here in that the fighter's got its weird things, but other classes would get expert at level 5. Other marshals do, and it would get 50 points right here, charged, and then the next odd level, it gets weapon specialization. And similar thing with greater weapon specialization. The marshals that get master always get greater weapon specialization at the next odd level after that. So that's just a design note, and it's one of those things that you'll find in the design guide. Those are the type of things that the design guide is for. Just little things that I've noticed about how the classes are designed, not just from a point value standpoint, but from a sort of a structural point. All right, let's see. So we looked at attacks. Defense is pretty similar to attacks, really. The only difference is, you've got the unarmored, light, medium, and heavy instead of unarmed, simple, martial, and advanced. And it's pretty straightforward. Same numerical values. And again, you only pay once. If the class gets master, it only pays once, 110 points, and then it doesn't pay again for all of the subcategories. I will stop here and just go back a little bit and look at attacks again. One thing to note that's a little convoluted for the fighter because of its fighter weapon mastery, but for other classes like say the wizard doesn't get full simple weapon training. The wizard only gets crossbow and a couple of other simple weapons. Well, that's what this is for, simple limited. The wizard gets trained in simple limited. And that's just a way of denoting that it doesn't have full simple, but the cost is the same. So the wizard still pays 10 points for simple limited trained. It seems like a bit of a jip, but I can understand from a balance standpoint how it works. So that's just to note that like I believe the rogue gets all simple training, but then it only gets a few martial weapons. The rogue then gets martial limited, where it still pays full price as though it had all martial weapon training, but it just doesn't have access to all martial weapons. And I should note that some of the developers have said it's completely within balance to, if you're running a campaign as a GM and you're in your rogue player, ask about it. You can just give them full martial training because their class is already paying for it. They're just not getting it, essentially. And some of the developers have said, yeah, that doesn't break balance. You can just give the rogue full martial training and it's fine. Last thing to note for defense is armor specialization. That one's a little more, I wouldn't say iffy, but there's not a lot to go on with armor specialization. It's a bit of a guess, basically just giving it the same value as critical specialization for weapons, but it seems to be working. If I ever find something better, or if there's ever a feat that gives armor specialization at a different level than say a level 6 feat, then I'll have to reevaluate this. But it seems to be working okay for just, I think the fighter and champion are the only ones that get it. So I've just given them 50 points for that, and it seems to work. Of course, the fighter has no spells. The fighter has no subclasses. So we'll just go to the class abilities here. So we're done with the proficiencies. And you can see once you learn the proficiencies, obviously they're consistent across all classes. And so that's actually the easy part now. Once that I've pretty much got those figured out, and they're pretty consistent. The hard part of the BCS and the hard part of custom class creation with the BCS and using the point values is trying to figure out how much class features are worth. You got your proficiencies and you got your class features. And the class features are all going to be oftentimes very unique, and sometimes it's difficult to figure out what cost they're supposed to be in point cost. So we'll start with at the top here, attack of opportunity, which fighter gets at level 1. Um, the first and best place for classes to figure out values, if you're evaluating an existing class, is to go and look at its archetype. And that's what I did across all the classes, and it helps a lot. I look at the archetype first. Well, in the fighter archetype, it has a level 4 feat that gives attack of opportunity. Well, then a level 4 feat would be 30 points as a class feature. Boom, 30 points. Yes, some of the classes get attack of opportunity as a level 6 feat. I think that's just a way to try and let the fighter have more class identity by letting it keep that exclusive for more levels. I don't think it's a cost value thing. I think it's more just to keep it limited to the fighter, for a longer period of time. Even for the multiclass fighter, it makes the multiclass fighter feel unique. Whereas if the other classes that get this level 6 feat got it at level 4, well then why would you? The fighter archetype would be less useful to them, I guess. I don't know. But this seems to be working. Like I said, for the most part, if the multiclass archetype has a feat that is the same as one of its class features, that's usually going to be at least a good indicator of what the cost value of that is. Shield block is, of course, at the top here. We account for it there, so we don't need to count it again. I just list them all again here to make sure that I don't skip anything or miss anything. You see all of the proficiencies are down here as well, but they don't have a cost value because the cost value is already accounted for up above. And I do that so that you can still compare these to other classes across the row. I'm filtered just here to fighter, but when you're looking at it, you'll see other classes beside it, and you can evaluate them across the row to compare them. So the next unique feature is bravery, which is actually expert will saves, but then it gives you this extra bit. When you roll a success, on a fear effect, you get a critical success, and if you gain the frightened condition, it's reduced by a value of 1. Now, there's not a feat that gives you exactly this thing, I don't think, that I found. I've looked at all the feats at one point or another, but obviously I can only remember so much. So when I'm trying to find the value of a class feature, I'll go look for any feats that are similar to it. So when I did that, when I looked for feats that were similar to this effect, I found the Champion's Aura of Courage, class feat 4. When you become frightened, you reduce the condition value by 1. And it has some other stuff. It's not exactly the same, but I feel like this is close enough that I feel like it's close enough that I could say, okay, if bravery, at least this part of bravery, were a feat on its own, then it would probably be a level 4 feat, which means it would be 30 points. And that's what I have. The next unique feature is Battlefield Surveyor, which is just Master in Perception, but then it gives you this extra thing. You gain a +2 circumstance bonus to perception checks for initiative. Well, when I go looking for that in the feats, and I go searching around, well, you find pretty quickly Incredible Initiative General Feat 1 is exactly that. And so that's if you find a feat that's exactly the same, then yeah, that's probably the value that you're going to want to have. So that's your General Feat 1, which means it's going to be 10 points. And then the fighter only has 2 more, fighter unique class features. The combat flexibility and the improved flexibility that give you an extra feat per day, or 2 extra feats per day, or cumulatively 2 extra feats per day. Well, the feat it gives you is a level 8 feat. So you might think, oh, it's worth 80 points, or maybe it's worth 70 points. Well, but it gets it at level 9. And here's the thing, it couldn't give you this at level 7 because then it would be giving you a level 8 feat at level 7. So this has to come online at level 9. Well, it only makes sense at that point. You're getting a level 8 feat, but you're also getting the flexibility of being able to change each day. So it makes sense that it costs more than just a level 8 feat. So I gave it a cost of 90, like a level 9 feat. And the same thing here. I gave that a cost of 150 for level 15 feat. That's another way to evaluate values on existing classes. You can even see here, the bravery came on at level 3, and it ended up being worth 30 points. Now that doesn't, always translate, especially when it comes to level 1. Classes get a lot of level 1 features that may be worth more than just 10 points, obviously. But it's very common that class features are worth the level that they get them at. So you might get a level 5 feat that's worth 50 points, or you might get a level 11 feat that's worth 110 points. It's not always, but it is a good starting point for any class feature that you're unfamiliar with or that you don't have anything to compare it to. All right, and so that is the fighter and how it's built and comes together, how the numbers all come together to add up to 2100. And then from there, obviously, you don't stop there. You have to verify it, and the way to verify it is, as I said, once you start doing other classes, when those classes also add up to 2100, well, if you suddenly have 5 to 10 classes that are all adding up to 2100, that's when I started seeing, I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure that I've got the system working pretty well. And it still requires tweaks every now and then. I actually just tweaked the Ranger the other day because I had forgotten, because I'm human, I had forgotten to put the weapon critical specialization in the Ranger's features and account for it. So it was missing 50 points. But the thing is, the Ranger I never was happy with the way it added up. And then it made sense. Oh, I was missing 50 points. Once I plugged that 50 points in, I readjusted some other values and they made more sense. So when I find things that are wrong and I fix them, it only makes the system look more robust because, oh, that always felt wrong. Now once I found out what was wrong and I fixed it, now it looks right. So one thing I want to point out, just an interesting thing, that this may or may not be intentional. It could be a pure accident, but I only realized this much later on when I was just looking at these, after I'd already determined these to be the numbers, 10, Expert 50, Master 110, Legendary 190. When I looked at the levels, essentially, if you look at this, basically you've got, trained at level 1, Legendary at the highest odd level. Well, then basically you've got Master sitting right at the midway point, and then Expert is basically at the quarter point. But I found it interesting when I realized that if you add 40 to Trained, then you get Expert, and if you add 60 to that, then you get Master, and if you add 80 to that, you get Legendary. So you got this pattern of 40, 60, 80. Maybe it's just coincidence. It could be. It could just be, a coincidence because of the way that they're spread out. Of like, this is at, around level 5, this is around level 11, this is around level 19, and the spread just causes these numbers to look like this. But I thought it's interesting to note, and there could be some formula there, or something behind that, some chart or something behind these numbers that that the devs are working with. I don't know. Just something to keep in the back of my head. All right, and then so I think I'm gonna wrap it up there. But I've got some ideas for a couple more videos. I feel like these videos are gonna be better than trying to write a book and trying to explain the BCS, because you really need the visuals, and I don't think screenshots and text are really gonna do as well, at least for me. So I hope this video helps you understand it a little more. I got some ideas for future videos. I just got through decoding the psychic and thaumaturge, and I want to make a video on that next because it was so easy, which just shows that the system, it shows me that the system is working because I initially had the playtest numbers for the psychic and thaumaturge in the BCS, um, but they were, I felt good about them, but at the same time I didn't because they felt weird and off. But once we got the final versions and I plugged in numbers for the final versions, then they made so much sense and they look so good. It really showed me the system is working in real time. So it was exciting, and I'm gonna make a video showing me plugging in those numbers and how quick it is, and then spellcasting values, the cost of spells, the cost of cantrips, that was a headache. I spent probably 100 hours on that alone, and so that definitely needs some explaining. Uh, and then finally, I want to make a video about profiles and just explaining how they can be used with the BCS and how they can be used with the class creator form, but also just how it's a good way to look at the whole system. Um, I might even do in lessons learned about playing the system, because there's a lot of lessons learned from the BCS that go beyond just making custom classes. Um, Basically, when I play and look at anything, when I just picked up the recent Psychic and Thaumaturge, the final book, I I look at it through a lens now, the BCS, and I see things that you wouldn't see otherwise. You see the way things connected, the way things are built on each other, and you see the boundaries of the system, and you learn lessons about how to make better characters. Not just custom classes, but just making your characters. Um, this kind of helps you see the value of at least how the developers value parts of the system. Uh, and just there's other different things of just the way I understand why this class gets this or why this class gets that. So I want to make a video going over some of those things. Anyway, thank you for listening. I know this is a long video. I hope you got something out of it. I hope I wasn't too boring. I hope it wasn't too confusing. But it probably is because it's a complex system. Kudos to the developers. It's a complex system that is brilliant, and that to the end user that's just trying to play the game, you don't need to understand all this complexity. You can just pick it up and make your characters, and it's balanced and it works. But it's great seeing the complexity behind it here. Uh, it just helps you appreciate the balance of it. It as all things should be. So, all right, have a good one.